Hello, friends. I am here with Amalia in her beautiful home, in her magical kitchen. Amalia, thank you so much for being here. We're going to have a conversation today, Amalia and we're going to be talking all about cooking and mental health. Thank you, Amalia, for having me here, for opening the doors of your beautiful home. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Bienvenida, Mariela. Bienvenida a mi cocina. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. Well, we have been collaborating and talking, and we have been thinking about the intersection between mental health and cooking. And so today we're going to have a conversation about that. And my question, or my first question, Amalia, to you is, how do you perceive traditional Guatemalan cuisine, cooking, as a means to connect with cultural identity and your roots? And not just for you, but like how that can serve as a bridge for a lot of people, particularly people like me and like you who have transitioned from living in a Latin American country and then immigrating to here, to the United States, and still holding on through food, through cooking, to those traditions and that cultural background.
So for me, it has been a very deep connection to my culture, to stay connected to the food, to practice the food, because food is beyond cooking. Food is about connection. Food is even about healing.
Totally.
And it's about honoring our past, and it's honoring our present, and it's an opportunity to share our traditions with the future generations, which is what I am all about sharing all those beautiful traditions and customs that we have in our cultures in Latin America with future generations, so those continue to live on through them.
So important. And I'm so glad that you mentioned this piece, because when I think about mental health and the healing journey, I think about the importance of, oftentimes mental health as it exists, kind of manage healthcare. Therapy and psychotherapy as a mental health vehicle can oftentimes overly focus on pathology, can overly focus on what went wrong. Certainly attention to trauma, attention to things that have happened in our past that have left some unwanted marks and psychological scars. And certainly there absolutely is a need and to focus on that. But the way I'm thinking today about mental health and reclaiming that ancestral pieces into that healing journey is that, yes, that is important and that focus is important, but it is also as equally important to focus on joy, to focus on the positive aspects of our background, the positive aspects that we too experienced in our childhoods and along our path. And so that's why I think that cooking and that connection to our ancestral cultural as a way to go back in time and bring some of that richness that we can feel proud of, that we can remember, even in the midst of difficult memories that we may have or people may have. There was that cooking, there were those smells, there were those flavors that also were grounding and that were joyful. So I'm so glad that we are having this conversation and that this co-creation of meaning in terms of how can cooking be an element of healing, and how can it help improve our connection to self and in our mental health journey. So thank you, Amalia, for being willing and interested in participating in this conversation.
You know, it is my pleasure to talk about this because for the longest time, the kitchen has been my therapeutic place. I call the kitchen my happy place for that reason, because it is a place where creativity comes into play in so many different ways. It allows my mind to wander. You know, sometimes I find a lot of joy just by looking at ingredients in front of me and prepping those ingredients that are going to turn into something delicious and wonderful and comforting. You know, the kitchen is about comfort. The kitchen is about memories that we have had in the past, and it's an opportunity to bring those memories forward to share with others. But others are our own Latin American counterparts and immigrants who have had similar memories, but also, you know, oftentimes when I do presentations, I am sharing with non-Latin Americans who cannot relate to our culture, to our traditions. And for me, it's very powerful to focus on the traditional cuisine of the 21 Latin American cultures for that reason, because that gives me the platform to educate and to help people better understand and appreciate where we come from and where we are here as immigrants in our own kitchens, trying to replicate what it's in our hearts and our memories, what we remember from our grandmothers, from our mothers, from our times at the dinner table, during the holiday season, during a birthday, during any special celebration, and everyday meals where we sit as a family to talk about anything under the sun. And then here we have a wonderful meal that is in front of us, and we're not thinking twice about what we're eating. That is just who we are. And so for us, family is big.
Connecting, right?
And so is community.
It's community, and it has, you know, I'm glad you're touching on that social aspect of cooking too. When you share a meal with other people and you talk about like how cooking can also be a vehicle to share our culture and to invite others to our table. And that's a way of connecting too. That is a way of bridging some differences that we may perceive and may very well have. But it becomes this opportunity to engage in conversation, to engage in socialization, and to share. And that in of itself is conducive to our mental health, to our need to connect and relate to others. So thank you for pointing those things out. Now, Amalia, connecting to your lineage, right, through your traditional Guatemalan cooking, how has that for you as an immigrant helped you in your mental health and in your healing journal, understanding that healing is really living is healing. None of us come fully done, fully, evolved. We have to go through a process of learning and transformation in life to really have a lot of different things emerge from us. So in your experience, how has traditional cooking and connecting to that cultural identity of yours through cooking, through the practice of cooking, has sustained and helped your healing journey?
You know, when I feel troubled, when I feel challenged, when I have an idea in my head, in my mind, when I am struggling to solve a problem or a situation, oftentimes I come to the kitchen and I let that worry go away through the cooking process. Cooking allows me to disconnect myself from traditional, regular worrying and or any kind of thought or feeling that is not wholesome.
Yeah.
So, which happens to us, sometimes, every day, sometimes once a week. I don't know. Everybody's different.
Yeah, but we all have things that trouble us, things that
You
we
know,
worry about.
our mind is alive, and our mind is always
Thinking.
creating information, and we're always thinking, right? And sometimes the kitchen is a good place to get away from that, because the creative part of the mind is wholesome for the body. The creative part of the mind is it's so important. I can't stress that enough, because it just takes you into a different dimension. For me, when I am in the kitchen, I am just engaged in the task, in the recipe, in understanding what the recipe at hand is supposed to be like. If I have never made it before, if I have made it before, okay, this is a recipe that I have experienced at home, and so that I know what I'm looking for. So it's really, really easy, but still very relaxing, because I am multitasking. Oftentimes I am creating 4 or 5 dishes at the same time.
At the same time, my gosh,
and
that speaks to your level of expertise, of course. But yes.
Yes, and so for me it's a relaxation, and this is the reason why I love teaching, right? I've been teaching for a long time, and when I teach a class, say of an hour, I am multitasking, and I am creating simultaneously 3 to 4 dishes at the same time. So it's an orchestration.
Yes.
And so this is a strategy, right? Just like in business.
Yeah.
It's a strategy that I have built around the work that I do, but that healing part that we're talking about, it keeps me occupied. It keeps my mind engaged
in one. So I'm so glad that you're touching on this, Amalia, because what you're describing really has to do with a mindful activity. Cooking, the way you're describing it, is in of itself a mindful practice. You have to focus on different senses that you rely on for cooking. The sense of smell, your vision, the textures that you feel, listening to the sizzling sounds, and all of that anchors us, anchors the brain in our senses. And that is actually a mindful practice, and something that I will often talk to my patients about, developing that capacity to single task or to be immersed in their sensorial experiences as an antidote to stress, to anxiety sometimes, to depressive thought. And so this is a mindful practice. Cooking can be a mindful practice, and it kind of requires it to be a mindful practice, because if you're not paying attention, you can cut yourself, right? You can burn something. So it really does involve a lot of engaging all of your senses, and that in of itself is a stress reliever. So it is really beautiful to start thinking about that intersection and what you're describing, how it helps you connect to something in the present moment, and letting those worries or those thoughts kind of be in the background by immersing yourself in a mindful activity.
So cooking requires preparation, requires being in a state of mind of focus, to be able to deliver what you are wanting to deliver. And during my time in culinary school, I learned this concept called mise en place. It's a French term that loosely translates into everything in its place. It's about kitchen organization. And that has been a priceless concept for me in the kitchen, because it not only allows me to understand a recipe that I have never made before, by reading it from top to bottom, just to become familiar with, the steps, what new ingredients might be there. and then anticipate the cooking techniques. Am I going to need the oven, the stove, and so on? What equipment am I going to need? All this requires focus and preparation. When you are teaching a class and you are talking and people are asking you questions, it's very distracting. So this mise en place concept is extremely helpful because it keeps you grounded in your thought process when you are executing. So you can be asked a question, well, that's distracting. I find questions very nurturing because I immerse so much myself into the cooking experience, not necessarily in the cooking process, but the experience, because I want to bring to you what I experience inside. And that is the way when I cook and when I invite people to my home, when I cook for others professionally, I cook for them what I love to eat, because that is what I think that is good to share from the heart and from the soul. And that is so easy because storytelling just comes from that, from experience and from experimentation. And we talked earlier about, how do you bring a recipe to life from another country where you don't necessarily have all the ingredients necessary. I have been dealing with that since I immigrated in the US.
Right, and I think that process of immigration also requires a lot of adaptation and a lot of flexibility, which is part of what you're saying. You have to adapt to functioning in a new environment with new tools and new strategies. And that ability to have to adjust and go through that process allows you to become more flexible. And like in cooking, right, bringing some of those recipes from back home, also you need to improvise, you need to change certain ingredients because the landscape is different, but you still, that process, that flexible, exercising can be really helpful too, as a way of thinking about what oftentimes life requires from us. We more than always don't have control over a lot of things, external things in particular. So being prepared, you talk about that, right? Like when you're cooking for a group of people, like you have to have a plan, and you have to have things in their right place. So that preparation allows you to be spontaneous and to be able to respond to questions and to be able to respond to demands that may arise in the moment. And I think that's why having some practices also for us in terms of thinking about our mental health is, what are some of our tools that we have that can help us face life and adjust to multiple demands? And having a plan and having practices such as cooking, in this case we're talking about cooking as a mindful practice, can help us and equip us to deal with stress, to reduce our response to stress, and to connect us to our culture and our identity. And that in of itself can be very healing. So one of the things that I was also thinking about, Amalia, as we talk about this, is for me the importance of self-compassion and self-soothing as elements that are so important to our healing and self-improvement. And so I want to explore this with you in terms of how you use some of that in your cooking. And earlier we were talking about, oh my gosh, when you're cooking, you are really improvising. You have a plan, obviously practice, you've been doing this for so long. But things change rapidly sometimes, things burn, things, fall and you have to use something else, and you have to adjust. Now, when you think about compassion towards yourself, and how that is an important element to our mental health, but also something I'm sure that you've had to implement in your cooking. What can you tell us about the importance of loving ourselves, even through mistakes, even through detours that we may experience?
I have learned to give myself grace, not only in the kitchen, but also in life. And we all evolve. We go through stages in life.
Yes.
And as we become older, hopefully we become wiser. And those thoughts and feelings that we had when we were much younger are milder because we recognize we've been there before. If we experience painful situations now that we have experienced in the past, our minds recognize that. I have learned to give myself grace when I don't have the answer for everything. I know I don't know it all. And in fact, I am glad that I don't know it all because that
You're
keeps
still
me
learning.
That keeps me learning, that keeps
Absolutely.
me curious, that keeps me experimenting. And I give myself grace when I burn something, which,
It happens.
it happens.
Even
and
to the most,
of
experienced
course,
chefs.
you are never perfect in any way. We're all human beings.
I love that you're touching on that.
We are all human beings that continue to make mistakes through life. And the mistakes, I don't see them as a bad thing. I see them as a good thing. And that's where the grace comes in.
Yes.
I see mistakes and challenges as opportunities to improve upon a task or a job or our own mind, our
Absolutely.
thinking.
Like a growth mindset, right? Like how to, through perceived failures, I don't use that word anymore, but it's an invitation. Failure, as we understand it, is really neutral. We give it meaning, and sometimes that's where the self-love and compassion can be so important, is by holding ourselves gracefully and understanding that mistakes and things that don't go according to plan is part of the course, and adjusting quickly and being open can allow you not only to deal with the situation at hand, but to grow in your capacity to be more resourceful, creative, etc. I want to share a little something that happened earlier. We started recording our video and this conversation, and it turned out that a 45-minute conversation we had earlier didn't record, and it happens. And I got to see, Amalia, your grace in that moment and your kindness too, towards me and towards the process. And that I do see is such an important protective factor for us, and a mental, agile practice. So I just wanted to share that because you talk about that, and we're talking about self-compassion and the importance of grace. And I got to experience that with you here
Well,
today.
I got to experience that with you too, because life happens, right?
It does.
And when life happens, you have to pivot.
Yes,
you pivot in the best way you can. And, here we are doing it again.
Doing that again. And so, yes, wonderful, wonderful. Another piece that we were talking earlier was that piece about growth and healing through... Ay, no me acuerdo que habíamos hablado antes. Oh, can you look at the question, maybe? Una pregunta to prompt us.
So, we pivot, right? We have had this...
hiccup.
Well, just life happens. And it's... the important thing is not letting yourself get involved, too involved in that.
Or lose hope, or
lose ourselves in the process, right? So we just keep going, and we can do it again.
Yes.
And I think this time around it's going to be or it's better because now we
We
practice.
practiced, talking about the importance of practice
Yeah.
and practice being a foundation to be able to improvise.
So-
when you practice, you have that gift.
Absolutely. And so you've been asking me a lot of great questions, and I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. So, what does the cooking process mean to you? How does that heal you, and how does that connect you to your roots?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. That is actually a really beautiful process for me to think about. I immigrated from Lima, from Peru, when I was 15 years old. So in Lima, in my life up until that point, I never really learned to cook. I never received formal instruction in cooking or anything like that. But as you know, Amalia, cooking and food is such a central part of our existence for those of us who have grown up, who have had the privilege of growing up in Latin America. And so there's a lot of absorbing and learning that goes, even if you're not like formally taught how to cook. So when I moved to college, it was around the time that I started college, and I was living with my husband, now husband. We had to start preparing meals and cooking. He's also from Latin America, and so cooking and those familiar flavors are also so important and central to him. So, but I didn't know how to cook, and of course, you know, the expectation that I would be doing the cooking, you know, was because that's a traditional path, and so I did not know how to cook. And I remember calling my grandmother, and she helping me, you know, walking me through, this is how you cook rice. I mean, the most simple things. And I remember she gifted me my very first, she sent me actually, because I already was living here, she sent me my first cookbook. And so through me needing to learn how to cook, I reconnected with my grandmother, and we connected over a very nurturing topic that she was an expert on, and that she got to pass down some of those ways, and I got to learn. So it was very healing for me at the time to not only reconnect with her, but to reclaim that part of my heritage and in my new life here.
That's wonderful. I am wondering how you have evolved in your cooking. Obviously, for us, it's a necessity to eat, and so the necessity of cooking at home is always there. So I am wondering how you have evolved, and what that evolution has been like, and where you feel that you are. Are you more comfortable now? Are you experimenting, and so on?
Definitely, definitely. Cooking for me is also my happy place most of the time. And my cooking skills and have evolved, not only in the preparation and in the actual outcome of what I make, which I think is really delicious, but also in how I approach cooking and entertaining as well. I remember that when I first got married, before we had kids, entertaining, of course, at that stage in your life is so central, and it's such a big part of your life, making friends, entertaining people. So we did that quite a bit. And I remember being so controlling and perfectionistic, you know, with the presentation, with everything being like clean, the house looking perfect. And now that in hindsight, I now understand that's not at all how it was cooking and entertaining and gathering loved ones was for us in Peru growing up. It was chaotic. It was kids running around. It wasn't like Martha Stewart beautiful kitchen presentation. It wasn't like that. But, I think I absorbed some of those expectations from living here and also media, etc. So I became so rigid about the presentation and so forth. And that created a lot of stress for me.
Yeah,
Have you experienced that?
We should talk about that.
Yeah,
because
can you please say more about that?
I often encounter women who find that, well, the kitchen and cooking are labors of love. Around the holiday season, it is a very stressful time for most people.
Yes.
And the reason for that is that we are busy. We have routines in this country that don't necessarily involve cooking traditional meals every day.
Yeah. And our time is really limited, and cooking can take time.
And it does require the mise en place that I talked about. Having that mise en place in mind is very peaceful for me. And that is what I try to, transfer to other people when I teach, when I give presentations. It can be better, focus on simple recipes, focus on what you like, and then practice the gift of time. Prepare a week before. When I have a big event, when I have a big gathering, when I am going on a big trip, I start preparing and I start thinking about what am I going to need. I make lists, checklists. That really eases my mind, because it gives me a sense of accomplishment as I am crossing through tasks and through items that I need to gather. As an example, I am planning a big trip for January where I will be out of the country for 3 weeks.
That's a long time.
And so I began thinking about what it is that I need to do in preparation to that, not only because I have a business to run, but I have many
commitments.
I have a lot of irons on the pot, per se, and I have commitments, and I have a lot of plans for next year. And so all those things, are cluttering, my mind in a good way. But then I have to carve time to also strategize about how am I going to pack the destination, what kind of weather, what am I going to need, immunizations that I need, all those things. And so for me, planning 2-3 months in advance for that, not waiting until the last minute. And that is exactly what I do in the kitchen. So if I know that I have a gathering in my kitchen next month, I am not going to wait 2 weeks before, because that is just going to increase
it's going to create your stress.
And
I think that's why people sometimes find entertaining, especially around the holidays,
very stressful. Absolutely.
So what I hear is that preparation is really key. And then another thing that we were talking about is the importance of self-compassion and grace, and particularly at busy times, because when we're stretched, our attention is stretched, our time is stretched, we become less patient, both with others in our lives and also with ourselves.
And that steals away from our
joy.
And so, giving ourselves grace is one thing, but also giving ourselves permission not to bring perfection in what we do, because there is no perfection anywhere. And so if we focus on planning, on a simple checklist, and then an execution list, which it goes hand in hand with a list, that alone is going to ease your mind so much, because you know that the plan that you have is to have A, B, and C, and then you make checklists for all those, and then you put a timeline, when should I do this, when should I do that, and so on.
So you kind of like time it, like space it out,
yes.
So it doesn't feel so cramming and pressured.
For me, it's about strategy,
Strategizing.
And that is exactly what I'm trying to manage. Not become so involved into the stressful times or the stressful portions of a bustling, kitchen or a bustling home or a bustling environment where I am going to go in. I want to stress preparation is so key
Important.
for everything, not just for the kitchen, but for anything that we do in life. Preparing ourselves can be the best gift we can give to ourselves, because that is going to give us more happiness, more joy, more enjoyment, right?
Because it frees us up, right? Preparation is a master of improvisation. And you see people like you experience, chefs or, whatever your craft is. And you say, they can just whip out a recipe or a conversation or something. And what people often don't understand is that has taken many, many years of preparation, but in practice. And so when you have that practice and preparation, it becomes easier to improvise. And by what I mean by improvising is letting go of that perfection. So also, as we think about self-compassion, how do we hold ourselves patiently as we are learning a new skill? In this case, for some people, it might be cooking, it might be something else. But how do we hold ourselves patiently and gracefully as we're learning? Because initially, I think we need to have things very tightly because we don't have that practice yet. So I was thinking that maybe we can expand a little bit more in our next series of conversation, Amalia, about cooking and how do we keep ourselves mentally sane and joyful as we think about this holiday season, entertaining, gathering, and cooking. So maybe that is something that we can continue to explore and have a conversation about that. What do you think?
Sounds wonderful. And this can be a segue into part 2 of this conversation. I would also like to explore more about the beauty of collaboration, because collaboration can be so powerful in every state of our lives, personal, business, or even the kitchen. And so we cannot do it all ourselves. No. And as we move through different projects that we have, we need mentors, we need helpers, we need relationships, and we need community to keep us whole, because that is the power of community, to help us continue to thrive, to feel that we belong, and that we have friends out there that we can rely on, and that we can tap into when we need help. All that is connected to any aspect of life. I love that we are doing this exploration of healing, of compassion, of collaboration, and that we are going to be expanding on that and more on part 2.
Yes,
so there's more to come.
Love that. Amalia, I want to thank you once again, and I love that invitation, and I do we've talked about this, and I do want to continue to explore the power of collaboration, and the power especially of collaboration versus competition in our community. I thank you for opening the doors of your beautiful home, of being graceful with me and patient through the hiccups of technology and so forth, and to be collaborating together on the important topic or theme of healing and cooking and connecting to our cultural roots. So thank you once again, and I cannot wait for our next conversation.
Thank you, Mariela. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. And my kitchen is your kitchen, and it's always open to you and to these conversations that are inspirational and that are wholesome, and that allow us to share our traditions and our beautiful culture with others. So look forward to having you again, and thank you for visiting me.
Gracias, Amalia, un gusto.